You were nothing before my son found you, and you'll be nothing again. Margot's voice cut through the half-empty living room like a blade, her Cartier bracelets clinking as she gestured at the moving boxes stacked against the wall. She stood in my doorway uninvited, the way she always did, as if every door in the world existed solely for her convenience. I folded the last of Theo's flannel shirts and placed it in the box marked Keep. Not donate. Not storage. Keep. Because some things you hold on to even when the person who wore them is gone. I said, "What do you have to say for yourself?" She stepped closer, her Louboutins leaving faint impressions on the hardwood Theo and I had refinished together one humid July weekend, cursing and laughing and ordering too much pizza. I looked up at her. Margot Ashford at 61 was still a striking woman. Silver-streaked auburn hair swept into a French twist, a cream blazer that probably cost more than my first car. She carried herself like someone who had never once been told no. "I think you should sit down, Margot," I said quietly. "I will not sit down in this sad little house while you ransack my son's belongings. These are my belongings, and this is my house." I held her gaze. "But you already knew that, didn't you? That's why you're really here." Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible community. If you're enjoying these stories, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us keep sharing. Let's continue. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt. Margot didn't do guilt. But something close to recognition that this conversation wasn't going the way she'd rehearsed in her Mercedes on the drive over. Let me go back to the beginning. I met Theo Ashford on a rainy Wednesday in October, the kind of day Portland does better than anywhere else. Gray sky, wet pavement, coffee shops glowing like lanterns on every corner. I was 29, 3 years out of a forensic accounting position at a mid-sized firm where I'd spent my days tracing embezzlement schemes and my nights wondering if spreadsheets were all life had to offer. I'd left to take a quieter job as operations manager at a property management company. Less money, less stress, more room to breathe. The company was Ashford Holdings. I didn't know what I was walking into. To me, it was a 20-person office in a nice building downtown, managing residential and commercial properties across the Pacific Northwest. I didn't know about the family behind it, the generational wealth, the society pages, any of it. My background check on the company had been limited to Glassdoor reviews and a quick scan of their financials. Everything looked clean. Boring even. Exactly what I wanted. Theo was in the break room when I arrived for my first day, struggling with a coffee maker that was clearly winning the fight. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing a rumpled button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and an expression of genuine defeat. It beeped 3 times, and now it's just, "Judging me," he said without looking up. "Did you put water in it?" He paused, looked at the empty reservoir, then at me. "I have an MBA from Wharton," he said, completely deadpan. "And I have a Keurig at home that I still can't program," I replied. "We all have our blind spots." He laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a CEO meeting a new employee laugh. A real one, surprised out of him like a sneeze. And that was it. That was the moment, though neither of us knew it yet. For the first 3 months, we were strictly professional. Theo ran the company. I ran the office. We talked about lease agreements and maintenance schedules and quarterly projections. He was smart, fair, and oddly humble for someone who'd grown up with a trust fund. He asked questions instead of giving orders. He remembered people's kids' names. When the janitor, a quiet Salvadoran man named Ernesto, mentioned his daughter's quinceañera, Theo showed up with a gift, not a flashy one. A Barnes & Noble gift card because he'd heard the girl loved reading. That's who Theo was. He noticed people. I think he noticed me noticing him too. But he never made a move. Not once. No lingering touches. No suggestive comments. No after-hours texts. Later, he told me he'd been terrified. "You were the most competent person I'd ever met," he said, lying in my apartment with takeout containers between us. "I was convinced that if I said anything remotely flirtatious, you'd quit and I'd lose the best operations manager in the state. It was me who broke first." A Friday in January, everyone else had gone home, and I found him in his office staring at a framed photo on his desk. His father, Richard Ashford, who died of a heart attack when Theo was 23, leaving the company and a complicated legacy behind. "You okay?" I'd asked from the doorway. Today would have been his birthday. He set the frame down. 65. Mom's having a dinner at the house. Caterer, florist, the whole production. 30 people who barely knew him raising glasses of Chateau Margaux. That sounds awful. It is awful. He looked at me with those dark eyes, tired and honest. I'd rather be anywhere else. Then let's go somewhere else. We ended up at a dive bar in Southeast Portland drinking cheap beer and playing pool badly. He told me about growing up in the Ashford House, a 6,000 square foot craftsman in the West Hills that felt more like a museum than a home. Private schools, country clubs, summers on Cape Cod with families whose last names were also street names. His mother orchestrating every detail of his life with the precision of a military campaign. "She picked my college, my major, my first girlfriend," he said, missing an easy corner shot. "Literally picked her. Introduced us at a gala when I was 20. Ainsley Pemberton, daughter of a real estate developer. Mother approved. What happened with Ainsley? She was perfectly nice and completely wrong for me." He chalked his cue. "I ended it after 6 months. Mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. It was the most peaceful 3 weeks of my life." I laughed. He smiled. And then he said, very quietly, "I can't date you. You work for me." It wouldn't be right. I know. But I want to. 2 weeks later, I transferred to a contract position with an outside firm that handled Ashford's accounting. Same work, different employer. Our first official date was at a food car pod near the Hawthorne Bridge. Theo had never eaten from a food cart in his life. He stared at the menu of a Thai cart like it was written in ancient Greek. "Just get the pad CU," I told him. "What's pad CEU? Trust me." He took a bite, closed his eyes, and said, "I've wasted 31 years of my life." Those early months were a revelation for both of us. I showed him my world, thrift stores, farmers markets, camping trips where we slept in a tent instead of a hotel. He showed me his, the weight of legacy, the loneliness of wealth, the exhausting performance of being in Ashford, in a city where the name was on buildings. "You don't have to perform with me," I told him one night, lying on a blanket at Sauvie Island, watching stars you couldn't see from the city. "That's why I love you," he said. It was the first time either of us had said it. Then came Margaux. Our first meeting was a Sunday brunch at the Ashford House. Theo had been nervous all morning, straightening his collar, checking his teeth, acting like a teenager bringing home prom date. "Just be yourself," he kept saying, though I suspected he was talking to himself more than me. Margaux opened the door in a cream cashmere sweater and pearls. She looked me up and down the way you'd inspect a used car, slow and skeptical. "So you're the bookkeeper." "Operations manager, actually, and forensic accountant before that." How interesting. The way she said interesting made it sound like a terminal diagnosis. "Theo, darling, the Hendersons are in the solarium. Mrs. Henderson is dying to hear about the Napa property." She walked away without offering me a drink or showing me where to put my coat. Over the next hour, I watched Margaux work the room, introducing me to no one, positioning herself between Theo and me at every opportunity, steering conversations toward topics I couldn't contribute to: yacht clubs, benefit committees, people I'd never met, and properties I'd never seen. At one point, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my water glass. "I had Theo's previous girlfriends looked into," she said casually, adjusting a flower arrangement. "Standard precaution. You understand." I'm sure your investigator found that I grew up in Beaverton. My father teaches sixth grade, and my mother is a dental hygienist. He found exactly that. She plucked a wilting petal. He also found your student loans. Quite significant. They were. I paid them off last year. Admirable. That word, too, sounded like a diagnosis. Theo has responsibilities you can't imagine. This family, this company, they require a certain kind of partner. What kind is that? She smiled without warmth. The kind who understands what she's getting into. I understood perfectly. I just didn't care. Theo and I got married 14 months later at my parents' house in Beaverton. My dad grilled salmon in the backyard. My mom made her famous blackberry cobbler. Theo's college roommate, a big bearded guy named Nico, played acoustic guitar. 60 people, paper lanterns, mason jar centerpieces my mother and I had spent a week assembling. Margot declined to attend. A board commitment, she'd said. Theo had hung up the phone and stared out the window for a long time before I wrapped my arms around him from behind. Her loss, I whispered. Yeah, he said. But his voice cracked on the word. What I didn't tell Theo, not then, was what my forensic accounting brain had already started noticing. Small things, a property in Bend that was assessed at 3 times its market value. Maintenance invoices from a contractor that didn't seem to exist. Insurance claims on buildings that, according to county records, hadn't sustained the damage described. Old habits die hard. I started keeping notes. Not because I suspected anything criminal, not yet, but because the numbers didn't add up, and numbers that don't add up have always kept me awake at night. The call came on a Thursday at 4 in the morning. Mrs. Ashford, this is Officer Delgado with the Oregon State Police. A logging truck. A 2-lane highway near Mount Hood. Theo had been driving back from inspecting a property in Hood River. They said the truck crossed the center line. They said it was instant. They said he didn't suffer. People keep telling you that, as if the speed of death is any comfort to the person left behind. The next 48 hours exist in my memory as fragments. My mother's arms. My father's quiet crying in the kitchen when he thought I couldn't hear. The hospital, the paperwork, Theo's watch in a plastic bag, still showing the right time. The drive home in pre-dawn darkness, our house waiting for me the way houses wait, indifferent and permanent, not knowing that everything inside them has changed. Margot arrived at 7 the next morning. Black dress, dry eyes, a leather folder under her arm. I've contacted the funeral home, she said, stepping past me. St. Mark's is available Saturday. I've prepared a guest list. No hug. No. I'm sorry. No shared grief between 2 women who loved the same man, just logistics. His guest list or yours? I asked. She didn't answer. The funeral was 300 people in a cathedral Theo had never attended. Business partners, society contacts, politicians who owed the Ashford name favors. Margot delivered a eulogy about legacy and duty and the Ashford commitment to excellence. She did not mention me. She did not mention the salmon barbecue wedding or the camping trips or the food carts or the stars over Sauvie Island. She buried a version of her son that had never existed. My father held my hand through the entire service. She doesn't get to rewrite him, he murmured. You know who he was. 3 days after the funeral, I came home to find new locks on my front door. A security guard from Ashford Holdings, a kid who couldn't meet my eyes, informed me that Mrs. Ashford Sr. had ordered a property review. This house is in my name, I said, my voice flat with a fury I didn't recognize as my own. Ma'am, I'm just doing what I was told. One call to Theo's attorney, a careful man named Philip Hartwell, resolved it within an hour. Theo had transferred the deed to me 8 months ago. Margot either didn't know or didn't care. The next morning, my security badge at Ashford Holdings was deactivated. My personal belongings from the office had been boxed and left with the lobby receptionist, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Mrs. Reclears. Ashford said you'd understand. the girl whispered. Oh, I understand perfectly. And then the real war began. Margot moved fast. Board meetings I wasn't informed of, whisper campaigns among investors about my emotional instability, a motion to place my inherited shares in a protective trust with Margot as trustee. She called my parents' house, to suggest that I was not coping well and might benefit from professional help. My mother, 5'2" and fiercer than anyone I've ever known, had responded with words I won't repeat here, but that made my father choke on his coffee. What Margot didn't know was that Theo had prepared for all of it. Philip Hartwell called me 1 week after the funeral. Theo left something for you. He was very specific about the timing. He handed me a safe deposit box key and the address of a bank branch in Lake Oswego. I drove there the next morning in a daze. The vault was cold and fluorescent lit. Inside the box was a manila envelope with my name in Theo's handwriting, a flash drive, and a small leather pouch. I opened the letter first. Bridget, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and Mom is doing exactly what we both knew she would. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm not there to stand next to you, but I didn't leave you unprotected. 8 months ago, I found something I can't unfind. Remember how you used to joke about the Bend property numbers looking funny? You were right. You were right about everything. What's on this drive is the result of 8 months of digging. Mom has been running an insurance fraud scheme through the company for almost a decade. Inflated property values, fabricated damage claims, phantom contractors, shell companies routing payouts to offshore accounts in the Channel Islands. Conservative estimate, $22 million. I wanted to confront her. I almost did, twice. But I know her, Bridge. If cornered, she'd destroy the evidence and find a way to pin it on someone else. So I built a case instead. Everything's documented. Account numbers, claim records, contractor invoices that trace back to LLCs she controls, emails between her and her financial advisor in Jersey. I also restructured everything I could. The house is yours. The shares are yours. I've set up firewalls she can't breach without exposing her own methods. The leather pouch has Mom's emerald ring, the one she told everyone was stolen in 2009 and collected $180,000 in insurance for. It wasn't stolen. It was in her bedroom safe. I took it during Christmas dinner last year. Consider it proof of concept. Use everything however you see fit. Justice or mercy, your call. I trust you more than anyone I've ever known. I love you. I loved every minute. Even the IKEA furniture. Always, Theo. I opened the leather pouch. The emerald caught the light, deep green and obscenely beautiful. I slipped it into my pocket and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It took me all night to go through the files. Theo had organized them the way I would have, chronologically, cross-referenced, with a summary index. The forensic accountant in me was impressed. The wife in me was heartbroken. He'd been carrying this alone for 8 months, smiling at family dinners, sitting across from his mother at board meetings, knowing what she was and saying nothing, building his case brick by brick while protecting me from the fallout. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Ashford Holdings owned 46 properties. Over 9 years, Margot had filed inflated insurance claims on at least 19 of them. A roof replacement here, water damage there, always just under the threshold that would trigger an independent audit. The payouts went to Ridgewell and Associates, a management company incorporated in Delaware with no employees, no office, and a mailing address that traced to a P.O. box in Wilmington. From Ridgewell, the money flowed through 2 more shells before landing in accounts in Jersey and Guernsey under Margot's maiden name. The phantom contractors were the cleverest part. Margot had created 3 fictitious construction companies, complete with websites, business licenses, and even fake Yelp reviews. They submitted invoices for work that was never performed on properties that were never damaged. The insurance companies paid out. The money vanished offshore. Theo had even found the accountant Margot had fired 4 years ago for asking too many questions. A man named Dennis Yoon, now working at a small firm in Salem, who had kept copies of the original claim files out of self-preservation. His statement, recorded on Theo's phone, was devastating. I closed the laptop at dawn, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching rain streak down the glass. Theo's hiking boots were still by the back door. His half-finished crossword puzzle was still on the counter, folded to Thursday's page. A pen he'd chewed the cap of sat beside it. I picked up the pen, held it, put it back exactly where it was. Then I called Angela Min, my former supervisor at the forensic accounting firm, who now consulted for the Oregon Department of Justice. "Angie," I said, "I need to talk to you about insurance fraud. A lot of it." The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life, grieving Theo while executing his plan, sitting in board meetings with Margot across the table, watching her smile her predator's smile, knowing what I knew. Securing alliances with board members who'd suspected something was wrong but never had proof. Douglas Crane, the oldest member of the board and the man who'd stood as best man at Theo's parents' wedding, met me at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. Richard would be devastated, he said, studying the documents I'd brought. She wasn't always like this. After he died, something broke in her. The money became a way to feel safe, I think. "Will you support the restructuring?" He looked at me over his reading glasses. "Theo trusted you with everything. Then so do I." By the end of the second week, I had 5 of 7 board members aligned. The emergency meeting Margot had called to vote me out instead confirmed my authority as majority shareholder. I watched her face as the votes were tallied, confusion, then fury, then something I'd never seen from Margot Ashford before: fear. The anonymous tip went to the Oregon Department of Justice and the FBI's insurance fraud unit on the same day I filed for an independent audit of Ashford Holdings. Timing mattered. I needed the company to appear proactive, already cleaning house when the investigation went public. 3 weeks later, I was in Theo's old office reviewing contractor bids, real ones, when my assistant knocked. "Mrs. Ashford? There are federal agents in the lobby." My heart hammered, but my voice stayed level. "Show them up." "And call Philip Hartwell." They came in windbreakers. FBI, not IRS, which I'd expected given the insurance angle. 12 agents methodically working through the executive floor, copying servers, sealing file cabinets with evidence tape. Employees watched in silence. I prepared them the day before with a company-wide memo about a regulatory review, keeping it vague enough to be honest. The lead agent, a compact man named Supervisory Special Agent Reeves, approached my desk. "Mrs. Ashford, we're executing simultaneous warrants at your mother-in-law's residence and at 3 business addresses connected to Ridgewell and Associates." "Of course. Our full cooperation is already arranged. IT has prepared server access and our general counsel is standing by." He studied me for a moment. "You seem remarkably prepared." "I believe in transparency, Agent Reeves." By mid-afternoon, the news vans were outside. My phone buzzed constantly. Board members, reporters, Ashford employees panicking. And then, at 4047 p.m., Margot's name lit up my screen. "What have you done?" Her voice was a controlled scream. "I haven't done anything, Margot. They're in my house. They took my computer, my files, they went through my bedroom." "That must be very unsettling. Don't play games with me. You did this, you and whatever gutter lawyer Theo hired." I let the silence stretch. Then, "Margot, I think we should talk in person." I drove to the West Hills house that evening. The grand craftsman looked diminished somehow, as if the raid had physically shrunk it. Margot was in the study, a room I'd never been invited into during my entire marriage. Whiskey in a crystal tumbler, hair still perfect, hands not quite steady. "Sit," she said. I sat. "Whatever you think you know," she began. "I know about Ridgewell and Associates. I know about the shell companies in Delaware." I know about the accounts in Jersey and Guernsey under your maiden name. I know about the phantom contractors, the inflated claims, the $22 million you siphoned over 9 years. I paused. And I know about the emerald ring you reported stolen and collected $180,000 for. The blood left her face. Theo found everything, I continued. 8 months before he died. He documented it all. Every transaction, every forged invoice, every email to your financial advisor. He wouldn't. He did. I kept my voice steady, though my chest ached. He loved you, Marco. That's what makes this so sad. He gave you every chance to stop. He was waiting for the right moment to confront you, and then he ran out of moments. She stared into her whiskey. For the first and only time, I saw something human in Margot Ashford. Not remorse exactly, but the recognition that she had lost something she could never recover. Not the money, not the company, her son's faith in her. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want you to take responsibility. Cooperate with the investigation. Plead guilty. Make restitution. You want me to go to prison. I want you to face consequences. The same consequences anyone else would face." Her jaw tightened. "And if I don't? If I tell them Theo set up the accounts, that this was his operation?" The air between us went cold. I reached into my bag and placed a single photograph on the desk. Theo's photo of a document from this very study, dated and time-stamped, showing Margot's signature on a Ridgewell wire transfer 3 years before Theo even became CEO. "If you try to blame your dead son for your crimes," I said, "I will make sure every piece of evidence becomes public. Every photo, every recording, every statement from Dennis Yoon. The press will have it before your lawyers finish their morning coffee." She looked at the photo for a long time. "Get out of my house," she said finally. "Gladly." I stood. "One more thing. The emerald ring? The one you told the insurance company was stolen?" I took the leather pouch from my pocket and set it on the desk beside the photo. "Theo wanted you to have it back. He said you'd understand." I left her sitting there, staring at a ring worth far less than the lies she told about it. The investigation moved at the speed of federal bureaucracy, thorough and relentless. Margot hired 3 different law firms over the following months. None of them could make the evidence disappear because Theo had been too careful, too thorough, too much his mother's son in the ways that mattered, meticulous, strategic, relentless, but aimed at truth instead of greed. She was indicted on 14 counts: wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, money laundering. The plea deal came 6 months later, guilty on 4 counts, 32 months in a federal facility in Dublin, California, plus $19 million in restitution and fines. The day she was sentenced, I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to Theo's grave instead. A simple headstone in a quiet cemetery in Lake Oswego, not the grand family mausoleum Margot had insisted on. I'd overruled her. Theo had wanted simple. Theo had wanted simple. Theo had always wanted simple. She took the deal, I told him, tracing his name with my fingertip. 4 counts, 32 months. She didn't blame you. I think in the end she couldn't bring herself to. A jogger passed on the path behind me. Birds argued in the dug firs overhead. The ordinary world continuing its ordinary business, indifferent to grief and justice and the complicated love between mothers and sons. "The company's okay," I continued. "Douglas is helping me restructure. We hired a real compliance team. Ernesto's daughter got into Portland State, by the way. She's studying literature. You'd love that." I placed a small stone on top of his headstone, the way my father had taught me, borrowed from a tradition not ours but beautiful all the same. A sign that someone came. That someone remembers. Back home, our home. I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the last light fade behind the fir trees we'd planted the spring after our wedding. 2 scraggly saplings from a nursery in Hillsborough. now taller than the fence line. Theo had dug the holes. I'd held the trees straight while he filled in the dirt. We'd argued about spacing and then laughed about arguing about spacing and then ordered Thai food and eaten it on this same porch, dirt still under our fingernails. The week before, I'd filed the paperwork for the Theo Ashford Foundation. Financial literacy programs for first-generation college students. Free forensic accounting workshops for small business owners who couldn't afford to protect themselves from fraud. Using the wreckage of Margot's crimes to build something that mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Proud of you, sweetheart. Dad says to eat something that isn't wine. I smiled. Set down the glass. Went inside to heat up leftover lasagna, because some battles you fight with evidence and strategy and nerves of steel, and some you fight by simply continuing to live the ordinary, imperfect, beautiful life that someone you loved made possible. The gold-digging bookkeeper. That's what Margot had called me from the very beginning. She'd been so busy looking down that she never thought to look around. Never noticed that the woman she dismissed as beneath her was the only person in the room who actually knew where all the money went. Theo knew. He'd known from the start, and he'd loved me, not in spite of it, but because of it. The fir trees rustled in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the house, Theo's favorite jazz record was still in the turntable, waiting to be played. I walked over and set the needle down. The first notes of Coltrane filled the room, warm and aching and alive. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like he was still here, leaning against the kitchen counter with that crooked smile, saying the thing he always said when I worried too much about what came next. "We've got this, Bridge. We've always got this." And somehow, even alone, I believed him.